The desert is silent, but Sergeant Daniel Carter knows silence in war rarely means peace. Cold wind drags fine sand across the steel hull of his M4 Sherman tank, the grains whispering against armor like distant rain. Carter sits half-exposed in the open hatch, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The rising sun stains the horizon red over the barren ridges beyond their forward position. Somewhere out there, the enemy waits. Inside the tank, the air smells of engine oil, sweat, and burned metal. The crew moves carefully in the cramped space below him. Private Lewis, the gunner, adjusts the 75mm main cannon, muttering to himself while checking the elevation gear. "Gun ready," Lewis says quietly. Corporal Martinez, the driver, taps the dashboard gauges with 2 fingers. The engine idles low, vibrating through the entire vehicle like a sleeping animal. Behind Carter, another Sherman rumbles forward, its tracks grinding through the sand. The column stretches behind them, American armor forming up before the advance. Operation orders arrived only an hour earlier. High command believes enemy forces are massing near a supply corridor in the desert. If they're right, the armored battalion must strike first hard and fast before the enemy can move. Carter lowers the binoculars. The sun is higher now, revealing long shadows stretching across the dunes. "Movement?" Martinez asks from below. Carter doesn't answer immediately. He scans the ridgeline again. At first, it looks like nothing. Then he sees it. A flash of metal. Another. Not rocks. Not wreckage. Armor. "Hold on." Carter whispers. More shapes appear along the distant ridge, dark silhouettes rising against the morning light. Tanks. Enemy tanks. Too many? Carter's stomach tightens. The battalion expected resistance. But not this. Not an entire armored line waiting in ambush. He grabs the radio handset. "Command, this is Eagle 3. We've got multiple enemy armor on the northern ridge." Repeat. "Multiple." Static bursts through the headset. Then the first shot comes. A distant thunder cracks across the desert. For a split second nothing happens. Then a Sherman 200 yards to Carter's left erupts in flame. The explosion punches a column of smoke into the sky. Inside the tank, Martinez shouts, "Contact left." Lewis swings the cannon toward the ridge. Carter grips the hatch rim, heart pounding as dust and fire erupt across the battlefield. The ambush has begun, and they've driven straight into it. The desert explodes into chaos. Sergeant Daniel Carter ducks instinctively as another shell screams overhead. It slams into the sand behind them with a violent burst of dust and shrapnel. "Down," Martinez shouts from the driver's seat. Carter drops halfway into the hatch as the Sherman rocks from the shockwave. Enemy tanks now line the distant ridge like iron predators waking from sleep. Muzzle flashes flicker along their barrels. Sharp bursts of orange against the pale morning sky. They've been waiting. Target front ridge. Carter barks. Private Lewis swings the Sherman's 75mm cannon toward the silhouettes. The turret rotates with a heavy mechanical groan. "Range?" Lewis asks. Carter lifts his binoculars again despite the shaking tank. The enemy armor is spreading along the ridge. Hulls angle down toward the American column. Dark crosses are barely visible on their turrets. German panzers. At least a dozen. Too many for a single company. 800 yards, Carter says. Panzer on the left. Fire when ready. Inside the turret, the loader slams a shell into the breech. CLANG. Up. Lewis squeezes the trigger. The Sherman's cannon erupts. The recoil punches through the turret as the shell streaks across the desert. For a moment Carter loses sight of it through the dust. Then a flash. The shell strikes the ridge just short of a panzer, blasting sand into the air. "Short," Lewis curses. Another German shell tears across the battlefield. It hits the Sherman beside them. The tank jerks violently as armor plates split apart. Flames burst from the turret hatch, followed by thick black smoke. For a moment, no one inside Carter's tank speaks. They all know what that means. No one survived that. At just 5 degrees right, Carter orders quietly. Lewis steadies the cannon again. The battlefield is now a storm of explosions, machine gun fire, and grinding steel tracks. American Sherman scramble for cover behind dunes while German tanks methodically fire from the high ground. They have the advantage. Elevation, preparation, surprise. Carter wipes sweat from his eyes despite the cold morning air. If they stay here, the entire column will be wiped out. He grabs the radio again. "Command, we're pinned by enemy armor on the ridge. We need to flank or we're dead out here." The reply crackles through the static. "Eagle 3, advance and break their line." Carter stares at the burning tanks scattered across the desert. "Advance, straight into that ridge." He looks down into the turret at his crew, young faces smeared with grease and fear. Lewis glances up. "What's the order, Sarge?" Carter tightens his grip on the hatch. Then he says the only thing he can. We're going forward. Martinez slams the Sherman into gear. The tank lurches ahead, straight toward the enemy line, and the ridge begins firing again. The Sherman surges forward. Steel tracks chew into the sand as Martinez pushes the engine harder. The tank roars across the desert floor, rattling violently over uneven ground. Inside the hull, every bolt and plate trembles with the strain. Sergeant Daniel Carter braces himself in the hatch. The ridge grows larger with every second. Enemy tanks remain dug into the high ground, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. Muzzle flashes flare again bright. Deadly signals that another round is already on its way. Incoming, Lewis shouts. A German shell slams into the sand 20 yards ahead. The explosion throws a wall of dust across the Sherman's path. Martinez drives straight through it, coughing as sand pours through the open hatch. Visibility drops to almost nothing. Keep moving, Carter yells. Behind them, the American column begins to follow. Several Shermans surge forward through the smoke, forming a loose line as they charge the ridge. It's the only chance they have. Close the distance. Force the German tanks into a fight where numbers and speed might matter more than elevation. Inside the turret, the loader struggles to steady himself as the tank bounces violently. Shell ready. Lewis grips the cannon controls. Target ahead, Panzer, center ridge. Carter spots it through the thinning dust. A Panzer IV, its long gun barrel already turning toward them. For a moment, the two tanks face each other across open ground. Hunter and prey. 600 yards, Carter says. Lewis exhales slowly. Firing. The Sherman's cannon blasts again. The shell streaks forward and strikes the Panzer's turret ring. The German tank jerks violently. A second later, flames burst from its engine deck. Lewis lets out a sharp breath. Hit, but celebration lasts less than a second. Another flash erupts from the ridge. Left, Carter shouts. A second Panzer fires. The shell slams into the Sherman behind them. The explosion lifts the American tank off its tracks. When it crashes back down, the turret is twisted sideways. Black smoke pouring from the hull. Carter's chest tightens. He knew that crew. Shared cigarettes with them just yesterday. There's no time to think about it. The ridge is now only 400 yards away. German tanks begin reversing, repositioning as the Americans close the distance faster than expected. Carter realizes something. The enemy didn't expect them to charge, but then he sees movement further along the ridge. More armor appearing through the dust. Bigger silhouettes, longer gun barrels. Lewis sees them too. His voice goes quiet. Sarge. Carter stares through the binoculars. Heavy tanks crest the ridge behind the Panzers. Massive, slow, deadly. Tigers. And now they're aiming straight at Carter's Sherman. The Tiger tanks appear like monsters rising from the earth. Sergeant Daniel Carter freezes for half a second. Binoculars still pressed to his eyes. He has seen pictures of them before. Intelligence briefings, training manuals, warnings whispered between tank crews. But seeing one in person is something else. The Tiger is enormous compared to the Shermans. Thick armor plates, wide tracks, and a long 88mm cannon capable of destroying a Sherman from more than a mile away. Now two of them sit on the ridge, and both guns are pointing directly at Carter's tank. Tiger tanks. Carter shouts. Inside the turret, the crew goes silent. Everyone knows what that means. Lewis swallows hard. We can't punch through that armor from here. Carter knows he's right. The Sherman's 75mm gun might damage a Tiger from the side, maybe from the rear, but from the front, almost impossible. Another flash erupts from the ridge. Move, Carter roars. Martinez jerks the Sherman sharply to the right. A second later the Tiger fires. The 88mm shell slams into the sand where they were seconds ago. The explosion sends a shockwave through the tank, rattling every bone in Carter's body. Dust floods the battlefield again. The Tigers fire with terrifying precision, their guns booming like distant thunder. One American Sherman explodes instantly after taking a direct hit. The turret lifts off the hull like a lid blown from a kettle. Carter forces himself to breathe. Charging straight at Tigers is suicide, but retreating across open desert is just as bad. There's only one option. Martinez angle toward those dunes, Carter orders. Ahead, the desert floor begins to rise into broken sand ridges and scattered rock formations. Natural cover. If they can reach it, they might close the distance enough to flank the Tigers. The Sherman turns sharply, bouncing violently as it races toward the dunes. German shells continue crashing into the sand around them. Lewis keeps the cannon aimed at the ridge, waiting for any chance to fire. Panzer moving left. He calls out. Carter spots it too. A damaged Panzer IV tries to reposition along the slope. Take it. The Sherman fires again. The shell punches into the Panzer's side armor. Flames burst from the hull as the German tank stops moving. but Carter barely notices, because the Tigers are advancing now, slowly, methodically, their massive guns tracking the moving Shermans below. Carter grips the hatch rim as the Sherman races toward the dunes. If they reach that cover, they might survive, but if the Tigers fire again before they get there, one muzzle flash erupts on the ridge. The 88mm cannon fires, and this time, the shell is coming straight for them. The world becomes white fire. Sergeant Daniel Carter hears the shell before he feels it. A shrieking howl tears through the air, then the desert erupts beside them. The 88mm round slams into the sand only yards from the Sherman's left track. The explosion punches a violent shockwave against the hull, throwing Carter downward into the turret. The tank skids sideways. Inside the hull, metal screams. Track hit, Martinez shouts. For a terrifying moment, Carter thinks the tank is finished. If the track is destroyed, they're a sitting target. A Sherman without movement is a coffin. Can you drive? Carter demands, pulling himself back up to the hatch. Martinez fights the controls, forcing the tank forward. The Sherman jerks violently, but the tracks grip again. We're moving, Martinez yells. The tank surges ahead, climbing the first rise of the sand dunes. Behind them, the battlefield burns. Several Shermans lie scattered across the desert, their hulls torn open by German shells. Thick black smoke coils into the sky, drifting slowly in the wind. Carter forces himself not to look too long. Focus on the fight. Ahead, the dunes finally begin to block the ridge from view. The massive slope of sand rises between them and the German guns. For the first time since the ambush began, the Tiger tanks lose their clear shot. Hold here, Carter orders. Martinez drives the Sherman behind the crest of the dune, the engine rumbling as they drop into partial cover. The crew breathes again, but only for a moment. Carter lifts his binoculars above the sand ridge. German tanks still dominate the high ground, their turrets scanning for targets, but now the battlefield has changed. American Shermans are spreading out, using the dunes for cover. Small groups of tanks maneuver through the shifting sand, trying to circle the ridge instead of charging directly into the German guns. Carter begins to understand the new battlefield. This is no longer a straight assault. It's a hunt. Lewis, Carter says quietly. Yeah, Sarge, if we flank those Tigers, we might get a shot at their side armor. Lewis looks up. That's a big might. Carter nods. It is, but it's the only chance they have. He studies the dunes carefully. A narrow valley of sand snakes around the ridge. If they follow it, they might reach the Tigers' flank without being seen. Carter lowers the binoculars. Martinez, he says, take us around the ridge. The driver glances back, realizing the plan immediately. You mean behind them? Carter nods once. Exactly. The Sherman turns slowly into the narrow desert valley. But as they disappear into the dunes, Carter doesn't see the German scout tank hidden beyond the ridge, watching them, and transmitting their position by radio. The Sherman moves slowly through the narrow valley of sand. Sergeant Daniel Carter keeps low in the hatch, binoculars resting against the rim as he studies the dunes ahead. The engine hums steadily beneath him, but Martinez keeps the speed down. One wrong move in terrain like this could throw a track or worse. Reveal their position. The valley twists between tall ridges of wine-carved sand. From the outside, the Sherman is almost invisible, exactly what Carter hoped for. Inside the turret, the crew works quietly. Lewis wipes sweat from his forehead despite the cold. Desert wind slipping through the hatch. You really think those Tigers won't see us? He asks. Carter doesn't answer right away. Instead, he scans the top of the ridgeline again. Still nothing. No, Carter finally says. I think they're watching the main fight. Behind them, the battle still rages. Distant cannon fire rolls across the desert like thunder. Columns of smoke climb into the morning sky. The rest of the battalion is keeping the Germans busy, which means Carter's tank might slip around unseen. Martinez guides the Sherman deeper into the valley. Sand shifts beneath the tracks, sliding down the slopes with a soft grinding sound. Then the valley begins to rise. The far end leads upward toward the ridge. If Carter is right, the Tigers will be just beyond it. Slow, Carter whispers. The Sherman creeps forward. Every man inside the tank knows what's waiting on the other side. A Tiger's side armor is vulnerable, but only if they get close enough, and only if the Germans don't see them first. The Sherman climbs the last stretch of sand. Carter slowly lifts his binoculars over the crest. For a moment he sees nothing but the wide desert beyond. Then the massive shape appears. One of the Tiger tanks sits less than 300 yards away, angled toward the battlefield. Its turret faces the American line, completely unaware of the Sherman creeping up behind the ridge. The giant engine growls as it fires another round toward the distant Shermans. Carter feels his pulse hammering. This is the moment. Tiger, 280 yards, he whispers. Lewis shifts the cannon carefully. Side armor visible. The loader slides a shell into the breech. CLANG. Inside the turret, the air is thick with tension. Lewis glances up at Carter. One shot, Sarge. Carter nods slowly. He steadies the binoculars. Fire. The Sherman 75mm cannon erupts. The shell streaks across the short distance and slams directly into the Tiger's side hull. For a split second, nothing happens. Then sparks burst across the armor. The shell ricochets. Lewis stares in disbelief. Armor held. Carter feels his stomach drop. The Tiger's turret begins to turn. Slow, heavy, relentless. And now the massive 88mm gun is rotating directly toward them. The Tiger's turret keeps turning. Slow, heavy, unstoppable. Sergeant Daniel Carter feels a cold weight settle in his chest as the long 88mm cannon swings toward them. The German crew has heard the impact. They know someone is behind them. Now they're hunting. Reload. Carter snaps. Inside the turret, the loader is already moving. Another shell slides into the breech with a sharp metallic clang. Lewis grips the firing controls, eyes fixed on the massive tank only 200 yards away. We can't penetrate the front, he mutters. Carter knows that. Every tanker in the war knows that. But the Tiger's turret isn't fully turned yet. For a brief moment, the side armor remains exposed. Track it, Carter says quickly. Disable the track. Lewis adjusts the cannon slightly lower. If they can break the track, the Tiger becomes immobile. A crippled giant. Ready? The Tiger's turret keeps rotating. The black muzzle of the 88mm cannon creeps closer to lining up with their Sherman. Another few seconds, and the German gun will fire. Fire! The Sherman's cannon blasts again. The shell streaks forward and slams into the Tiger's front track assembly. Metal shatters. The heavy track explodes apart in a burst of steel links and sparks. One massive section tears free and collapses into the sand. The Tiger lurches violently to one side. Lewis exhales sharply. Track destroyed. But the victory is short-lived. Even crippled, the Tiger is still deadly. The turret finished its rotation. Now the enormous cannon points directly at Carter's Sherman. Through his binoculars, Carter sees something chilling. The Tiger commander is visible in his hatch. Calm, focused, watching them. Reverse. Carter shouts. Martinez slams the tank into reverse. The Sherman jerks backward, tracks grinding furiously in the sand. But the Tiger fires first. The 88mm cannon explodes with a deafening roar. The shell slams into the sand just short of the retreating Sherman. The blast throws sand and debris high into the air, showering the tank in a violent storm. The shockwave rattles the turret. Lewis steadies himself against the recoil guard. He's reloading. Carter knows what that means. They have seconds. He scans the battlefield beyond the ridge, and suddenly he realizes something. The damaged Tiger is no longer alone. A second Tiger tank is moving down the ridge behind them, and this one has a clear shot at their Sherman. Carter grabs the radio handset. Eagle 3 to any unit Tiger on the West Ridge. We need support now. But through the static-filled headset, only silence answers. The Sherman skids backward through the sand. Martinez fights the controls as the tank struggles for traction. The engine roars loudly now, no longer trying to stay hidden. There is no hiding anymore. Sergeant Daniel. Carter grips the hatch rim and turns his binoculars toward the ridge again. The first Tiger tank sits crippled in the sand, its broken track hanging loose along the side of the hull. But its turret still moves, the long 88mm gun searching for its target. And behind it, the second Tiger is descending the ridge. Slow, steady, untouched. Lewis sees it too. Oh hell, this one hasn't fired yet. The turret is already turning toward the Sherman as the massive tank rolls down the slope like a steel fortress. Two Tigers, one crippled, one perfectly operational, both capable of destroying them with a single shot. Carter's mind races. They cannot outrun a Tiger in open desert. They cannot destroy it from the front. And the radio remains dead silent. No support, no reinforcements, just one Sherman against two German heavy tanks. Lewis, Carter says quietly. Yeah, you see the engine deck on the first Tiger. Lewis peers through the sight. Yeah, but we'd have to get closer. Carter nods. Exactly. If they circle the immobilized Tiger, they might be able to fire into its weaker rear armor. But doing that means exposing themselves to the second Tiger coming down the ridge. It's a gamble. The kind tank crews rarely survive. Martinez glances up from the driver's seat. Sarge, what's the plan? Carter lowers the binoculars slowly. There is no perfect move here. Only bad choices. But one of them might still work. He points toward the crippled Tiger. Full speed around it. Martinez blinks. You want to drive toward the Tiger? Carter nods once. That one can't move. but the second Tiger needs time to line up a shot. Lewis begins to understand. We circled the crippled one. Use it as cover. Carter's eyes stay fixed on the battlefield. Exactly. Martinez slams the throttle. The Sherman surges forward again, racing straight toward the immobilized Tiger tank. The German turret begins to turn frantically now. The Tiger commander has realized what Carter is trying to do. The Sherman closes to less than 100 yards. Carter can see the German crew clearly now. And then something terrifying happens. The hatch on the second Tiger opens. The German commander stands up, scanning the battlefield, and raises his arm, pointing directly at Carter's tank. The second Tiger's turret snaps into position. The gun fires.